Conference Championship weekend is just about here. Kickoff tomorrow in Atlanta to determine who hoists up the SEC Championship trophy. Of course, it means a lot for Alabama as well. I think a lot of people think Alabama is in, given the way that this committee has ranked these teams before. However, they want to solidify that spot. Georgia obviously in as well, and Alabama and Georgia, familiar two teams playing for the SEC Championship tomorrow. Welcome to Southeast Sports Plus. I'm Gerhard Mathangani, joined by Patrick Walsh. Patrick, I think if you're an SEC football fan and you were going back to the beginning of the season and you were just to pick two teams based on recent history who was going to play for the SEC Championship, it's these two.
You literally just took the words out of my mouth because that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, we had all the hype from Texas coming in as the preseason number one. Ooh, what's Lane Kiffin going to do then with Ole Miss? Brian Kelly, he's got to win this year. I picked LSU to win the SEC this year, but nope. It feels like it was just destiny that these two teams, for like the bajillionth time in recent memory, are going to play against each other in the SEC Championship. And I mean, it's always good to get a rematch of a game that was played the regular season.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was so early in the regular season, I mean, I would expect it to be pretty close. And I mean, I think I've talked to you about this a few times. Whenever I see these rematches, it always feels like the team that loses first ends up winning the second one.
Right.
It's just so hard to beat a team twice.
It certainly is. And what I like about this as well is that, like you said, there's been so many games played with these two teams outside of that game, because that game opened up conference play for both Alabama and Georgia. They both had a bye week before. And Kalen DeBoer has talked about this, and Kirby Smart has talked about this. They talked about it in the preseason, during the season, and going into this week, that every team that has a championship caliber has to get better every week. They have to find ways to improve every week. So logic will tell you that's the way that these guys are coached week to week. So since week 4, now we're in week 13, 14, you would think, okay, well, these teams are different, the same as far as, overall players in the field, but different as far as maybe some guys they rely on, maybe some injuries, and just the way the teams are executing and playing overall. I'm interested more so to see. People talk about rivalries. You throw away the record books. I think what's actually a little more apropos is throw away the result of a game that had been played before, because the score still might land in the 24-21 area. But what I think is really interesting is that how the game goes about and how different it is from the previous one.
Right, and I know both coaches talked about some injuries to some key players, but I mean, when we were talking about this Georgia team when they played Alabama last, all eyes were on that pass rush and just unable to affect the quarterback at all. And that was a big key going into that game, and it just felt like Ty Simpson could do exactly what he wanted whenever he wanted in that game. Alabama controlled the ball so well in that game. And then you look now towards the end of the season, I mean, you just look at last week. Haynes King did not look comfortable at all for Georgia Tech. And you want to talk about a snooze fest. That was a snooze fest last week. I think the final score was 16-9.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just not an enjoyable football game if you like offense. But I think we could be in for a defensive slugfest here this weekend because, I mean, you look at last weekend, Gunnar Stockton did not play great at all. And Ty Simpson, we had hyped him up all year, and he slowly started the decline here in the back half of the season. So it's going to be interesting to see which defense can out-defense the other team.
Right. So despite the fact that Alabama won the first matchup, despite the fact that the game was in Athens, Alabama's actually the underdog going into this one as far as the Vegas odds makers go. I think if I were to handicap this, I think I would put it right at a pick'em. I think it's sitting at 2.5 points right now. Do you find that interesting? Is there some value in Alabama, or do you think they just like Georgia more the way they were playing? You've alluded to the fact that Alabama's offense necessarily isn't looking the way that it was when it was humming. It was humming at the middle of the season. Here in the last maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks against South Carolina and others, it hasn't been the same.
No, it really hasn't. I mean, there were 2 interceptions thrown by Ty Simpson. Last game was a great game for Ty Simpson. 3 touchdown passes to Isaiah Horton, all inside the red zone there. But, I mean, it's just we had talked about Ty Simpson, I think, about a month ago now, and we were like, hey, this guy is on pace to win the Heisman over these other quarterbacks and Fernando Mendoza and Julian Sayin. And it just feels like ever since the South Carolina game, and I don't want to take credit for this by any means, but
Right.
I did mention at one point, I was like, hey, like, should we be concerned here about the offense?
Yeah.
I mean, I know this was the end of a tough stretch, and this was against the South Carolina team that at the time wasn't as good as some of the other teams that they had played before.
Right.
So it's like it's hard to get mentally focused for every game. But I mean, ever since that game, it's been like, I don't know. It's just been a little bit shaky, and that's one thing I am concerned about for Alabama rolling into this game.
Just last week we saw Alabama playing in the Iron Bowl, jumped out to a 17-0 lead. Auburn made it interesting late in the second half, but Alabama made the plays late, including causing the fumble at the end for Cam Coleman going into this matchup. So Bama, of course, beating easily Eastern Illinois, and then also very easily, being able to pick up a non-conference win once again early in the season. But I think, to me, where this Alabama team is interesting the most is being able to run the football.
Yes.
Because that's been the problem for this team throughout the course of the season, and also in pass protection with those running backs. We've seen maybe some shades of, okay, maybe they can rely on a guy like Daniel Hill. Maybe they can rely on some of these other running backs to be able to have that kind of production on offense. That way the offense doesn't always all fall on Ty Simpson in this game.
Well, they're going to have to rely on Daniel Hill because Jam Miller is now doubtful.
Yeah.
That's the last I saw, is that he was doubtful for the game tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't expect him to play. So, I mean, when you look at the games that Jam Miller has played in for Alabama, they're 8-1 when he plays this year. And then the other game, the other loss that he didn't play in, of course, is the Florida State one.
That's right.
And if you remember, Jam Miller's first game of the year was against Georgia. So, I mean, that's going to be a big factor, I think, in my opinion, for this game here tomorrow. But, I mean, Daniel Hill's shown that he can step up. I think he was the lead back for the Oklahoma game. And I know Bama fans don't really want to think about the Oklahoma game, but I mean, he had a pretty solid game.
That's right.
And Jam Miller really didn't do too much, but as you can see, it's been up and down in these final 5 games. We talked about the South Carolina game. That was a one-score game when it really shouldn't have been. LSU was a lot closer than it really should have been, but then you could make the argument like, hey, these rivalry games are always going to be close.
Right.
Then the Oklahoma one sticks out. You had a few opportunities to win. You blow out Eastern Illinois. Good for you. Enjoy the cupcake. And then the close one against Auburn, again, you can make the argument like, hey, these rivalry games are going to be close. But, I mean, it's just going to be interesting because I found that when you take a look at some of the recent SEC champions,
right,
it seems like it's just two teams just taking everything. I mean, it's Georgia, Alabama, Georgia, Alabama, Alabama. So it's just like, yeah. I mean, how would you not expect both of these teams to be in here?
Right, and then this is also 2 different ways of doing it. Every one of those championships that you see on your screen right now, those were done when there was an East and West division.
Yes.
Now there are no East and West divisions, and so now you have a situation where it's your top 2 teams as far as rankings go. I know a lot of teams ended up finishing with a 7-1 record in the SEC, but it's these 2 that are the cream of the crop that end up taking the 2 spots there in the championship game. Of course, talked about the implications for the college football playoff. Head coach Kalen DeBoer kind of threw some cold water on, in fact, that this should even be a question if his guys are in or not. We also got a chance to hear from the coach from the official SEC championship game press conference as his team heads over to Atlanta.
Well, I mean, we've had enough opportunities, just like any SEC game, every single week. All these teams that you play as well are going to have the adversity. There's just too many talented players on the football field every single Saturday. You know there's going to be momentum swings, playmakers that can make plays. And I think what you really got to do is you got to go back to what we've been talking about, working on since January, the training, and how that allows you to be physical on the football field, the stamina it takes, at this time of year. I feel like our guys are continuing to trajectory up. They continue to get stronger. We have proof of that. We can see that, and they feel it on the football field. And then, there's a mentality that you're building, and some of it comes from the strength, and some of it comes from the stamina that these guys have. But it also comes from just a real belief that you have through reps that you've talked about situations from a year ago that we were in where, we've had a chance to learn from them. All of our experiences that have shaped what this team is and, how we've come through only make us believe even more, give us that much more confidence. And so time and time again, it might not always be the end of the game. It might be earlier in a game where, you end of the half, a 2-minute drive, the way, your defense gets a stop and the offense can go out there and put even just 3 points on the board, in our clutch period there. So just our guys, really, I think when you look at our team, it's a balanced team. It's a team that believes in each other. We understand our identity, being physically and mentally tough, and then also just, winning the turnover margin.
So that was heavy on the Georgia or Alabama Crimson Tide going into this matchup. Obviously, their only SEC loss was one of those losses that were in those 5 games that you mentioned earlier and you saw there on that graphic. Meanwhile, for Georgia, ever since losing to Alabama in that Week 4 game earlier,
they've been on fire.
They've done nothing but run the table. 8 straight wins for the Georgia Bulldogs heading into this one. And until I would say maybe about 3 to 4 weeks ago, you could say probably the quietest winning streak in the country. There's not a lot of people talking about this team in the same way that they were before from a national perspective, and it might just be Ohio State and Indiana and all these other teams kind of sucking the oxygen out of the room, so to speak. But Georgia's just been steady and consistent. This is a young football team coming in. There are some injuries. Drew Bobo on the offensive line is injured his foot, and so that's kind of the center, your leader on the offense. Of course, his father, Mike Bobo, is the offensive coordinator for the Georgia Bulldogs as well, so that's why that name rings a bell for a lot of people in the SEC. But Georgia sits in a really interesting spot now. They're the favorite going into this. They're the hotter team going into this. They have the more impressive wins post that Alabama game. What do you see these Georgia Bulldogs as time has kind of moved on?
It is interesting because I go back to their first SEC game this year against Tennessee, and I mean they went down. I believe it was 28-0 early on in the game, and they fought back, pushed it to overtime, and ended up getting a win. And it was a gutsy win for this Georgia team. And then they find that their home winning streak gets snapped by an Alabama team that just imposed their will, so to speak, over this team between the hedges. And then the most impressive thing for me is they came out the next week against Kentucky and was like, okay, we're still Georgia just because we lost to Alabama. We could talk about how Kirby Smart might have an Alabama problem, and Kalen DeBoer problem, all that. Why don't we just come out and just show who we are? We are Georgia football, and then just impose their will against Kentucky. The one scare, I mean, there are a couple scares in my opinion. I think the Florida one was a little bit.
Sure.
It definitely raised my eyebrow a little bit. And then the Georgia Tech one, I was like, oh my goodness, like why was that game so close?
Why was it close? Yeah.
It's just, but here's the thing. It's the SEC championship, and I know we had just shown the graphic of all the Georgia, Alabama.
Right.
Georgia, when they play Alabama in the SEC championship, has never won.
Wow.
They have never won.
Wow.
All of the wins have come against LSU, Florida, and Auburn.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And for I think this is
Texas, sorry.
Yeah. And Texas obviously last year, being able to get that win. I think this Georgia team coming into this one, they have to be as fired up as anybody because of what happened earlier in the season and because of what happened in that Georgia Tech game. But to me, I think one of the most impressive wins in Georgia's winning streak here is obviously Texas. I know that game was at home. That game was at night. But to beat a Texas team that ended up beating Oklahoma later on in the year, have 3 really quality victories. To beat them 35-10 was certainly eye-opening. But did only score 16 and against Georgia Tech and gave up 21 to Mississippi State. So there are some kind of some holes in there that you think are a bit interesting. So this is not a perfect team by any means.
No.
I don't think this is a complete team. I think really the only complete team that I've seen so far is Ohio State.
Yeah.
But to me, if there's a kind of a second tier of complete team, it's Georgia.
Yeah, and I know we talked about to open up this show when we first started it back in August. It was like, okay, how can the SEC reclaim that dominance? And I don't want to, say anything too early, but it still feels like the Big Ten has the upper hand on the
That's
SEC
true.
because
Yeah.
I just look at Georgia and there's some glaring weaknesses there, and then I look at Alabama. There are definitely some glaring weaknesses there.
Right.
Glaring weaknesses with Ole Miss, obviously Texas A&M, and then Oklahoma. Sorry, Sooner fans. If you guys win a game, I will be shocked. Like, genuinely shocked if Oklahoma wins a game in the college
Me
football
too. That
playoff.
offense is too anemic.
The offense is too bad, but the defense is on pace and the same caliber as Ohio State.
It's unbelievable. And to me, they remind me a lot of the Houston Texans, where the defense is just sensational. And for some reason or another, they have the product. And I'm talking about Oklahoma now, not Georgia. Yeah. They have the product on offense to as far as talent goes. They have the product to get it done. They have the players to get it done. They just can't seem to get over the hump and play consistently on offense. Flipping back to Georgia now, this is a team led by Gunnar Stockton. And I find it interesting because when you talk about the Heisman Trophy race, who are the guys you're talking about? Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback of the number 2 team in the nation, the Indiana Hoosiers. The quarterback for the number 1 team in the country, it's Julian Sayem. The running back for the number 9 team, or whatever Notre Dame is right now, and Jeremiah Love. The quarterback, outside talk before Marcel Reed's, before the game, I would say before South Carolina, Marcel Reed was in the conversation. Quarterback of the then undefeated Texas A&M Aggies. The quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs is really kind of getting no love in this game.
No, he's not getting any love. And honestly, he hasn't been getting enough love the whole season. And you can look at this last game against Georgia Tech and be like, I mean, it really wasn't a great game for him by any means. And unfortunately, that game will probably keep him out of the Heisman, going 11 for 21 for 70 pass yards, a passing touchdown, and an interception.
Wow.
A 25.4 QBR. I mean, that's not really going to – that'll get you to beat Georgia Tech, but, I mean, outside of that, you're not going to really beat – I don't think you're going to beat Alabama with those numbers unless something crazy happens and the run game just takes over. But, I mean, before I remember earlier in the season we were talking about, hey, I mean, here's a guy, he doesn't have quite the same numbers as Ty Simpson the time.
For sure.
But he's still such a dual threat that you can't just not talk about him.
Yeah.
But I think if we're going to talk about a dual threat quarterback now, it's going to be Diego Pavia because Diego Pavia is the best dual threat quarterback in the entire country. And it's just unfortunate for Gunnar Stockton's sake that, things just haven't really panned his way here in the end. But, I mean, if you go back to last season, this was the time of year where he took over for Carson Beck, who got hurt.
You literally took that thought right out of my brain. I had to go to my computer just to make sure I had the numbers right. I thought he went perfect in the game. He had 4 incompletions, 12 of 16, only 71 yards. However, he did have a solid game on the ground and just really paced the offense in the SEC championship game. And that's when the lights went off. Everybody's like, oh, this guy could be something here. And I think that's when he essentially won the starting quarterback job if it was going to be open in fall camp. He essentially won it there in that performance. So obviously went on to play in the college football playoff game as well against Notre Dame, 20 of 32 in that game, 234 yards and a touchdown. And I think those 2 performances under the brightest lights sealed it for Gunnar Stockton. Who knows, maybe some SEC championship game magic might be coming back around this time again on Saturday.
Yeah, and this isn't going to be a surprise. Like, hey, you're getting thrown into this game here. I mean, he's worked all year for it. I go back to that Notre Dame game last year. It was just a little bit of an unfortunate circumstance with a schedule that seemed to be a little bit flawed. I think we found out that the conference champions should not have just automatically that long of a break because, I mean, 3 weeks, it's a long time. And I know you can get some rest there, but when you're out of sync like that and you just don't have the routine just can't quite be the same. And I mean, he looked pretty decent against the Notre Dame defense. That's a good defense.
Very good defense, for sure. We got a chance to hear from head coach Kirby Smart on his QB1.
Yeah, I don't know that they've leaned on Gunnar. Gunnar's doing his own prep, right? Gunnar does a great job preparing for each game, and he prepared last year so that when his number was called, he was ready to go perform. Those guys are their own individual selves. They sit in the same room with Gunnar, and they listen and they learn. They take notes. We get not a lot of action, but we get enough action with them that should they have to go in, they got to be prepared. Quarterback coaches do a tremendous job of putting those guys on the board, asking them questions. They get reps. They don't get as many reps as Gunnar, and I think that would be the case all across the country is how well do those guys prepare, because you never know when your number is going to get called.
So Alabama and Georgia square off on Saturday. But before then, the Alabama head coach was entertaining some interesting questions about possibly leaving Tuscaloosa. So we will connect the dots next here on Southeast Sports Plus. Stay with us.